we do from a really high level is we transform slum areas around the world into new, thriving communities. So just kind of imagine a 100 acres of land that is blank, and we take families that have been living in slums for years, and we build brand new communities and villages on that new land. So that's the very high level.
So you started the company in 2014, and what have you done in the past 2.25 years?
Yeah, so we started about 2 years ago, and we actually, the first thing we do is we fund houses for about $6,000 per home. And so one thing we track is how many houses that we've been able to fund and build. And in 2 years, we've done about 800 homes, and that's created about 7 new villages or communities.
So with charity, I think one of the issues as a whole is people are not entirely sure where their money is going. So something that you're working on is building transparency in that product or in that process.
Yeah.
Why do you think people right now don't necessarily trust that their money is going to the right places?
Yeah, so I'll give the folks a quick background on like how this thing started. Okay. So basically, I never thought that I would start a charity. It's like the last thing I thought I would do. I actually had a for-profit startup before this. And then I took a trip down to Haiti a couple years after the 2010 earthquake, if you guys remember that instance. And I just saw thousands of people living in these tents, and it was just very clear that this was a human need and suffering that should not exist. So that was the first problem. But the second problem was I couldn't find a charity to give to that I could really trust where my donation went, right? So if I put an input of $1,000 to try to help this situation, well, what I saw was you didn't really know where your money went. It was kind of like a black hole. You didn't know what percent was actually going to the need. And at the end of the day, you didn't really know who you were helping. And so because of that experience and the frustration with that experience, that's how I created our new model with New Story, which the 1, 2, 3 is that we have a crowdfunding platform where you can go onto our website and you can meet families that are living in life-threatening homelessness around the world. You can see their picture, their story, and then you can give directly to them, so you know exactly who you're helping. 100% of the donation goes to build the homes, and then when the family moves into their new home, we take a video of them moving in, of them getting their keys and their home certificate, so the donor knows from beginning to end the end result and like what they actually did. And so the whole idea of New Story came out of frustration with kind of the status quo of the model. And I think that's how a lot of things happen, especially here, right? There's frustration, there's pain points, and then you work backwards to try to create a new experience.
So by beefing up the transparency in this process, what kind of results have you been seeing? Are repeat givers more now with this new model?
Yeah, so there's actually, whoever is out here now still, how many of you, if you gave $1,000 online to a large organization, would like entirely trust where the money was spent? Show of hands. Yeah, so about 43% of Americans would say they don't really trust charity, right? That's obviously a lot of people, that's a lot of potential. Right. And so what we've seen is it's not that those people don't want to help other people, right? Like I don't believe that at all. The issue is that they don't know who to trust or like where to spend their money, and so they just don't do it. And so what we've seen is those people actually do want to help others, and so if you can provide them with a model and a vehicle to do it, then they're more inclined to donate. So we've actually unlocked like more donors that in the past they weren't really into the whole like charity thing, especially international charity. Not just individual donors, but also with corporate partners as well, because a lot of people have unfortunately been burned, and there's headlines, and the reality is that stuff happens like that, and the whole word charity gets tainted to fit, unfortunately, like that view.
So how do we stop those types of things from happening, and how are you working with existing large charities to build in this new transparency and this new authenticity that might have been lost in recent years?
Yeah, I think it first starts with like if you're going to give a donation, right? Like the donor should take a little bit of time and just say, hey, if I give, do I know where the money goes? Do I know what percent of the money goes? And do I know the end result of the donation? And if the answer is no, then you probably shouldn't give there, you know? So I think first it starts with the donors of like having a higher level of like expectation, but you can't have a higher level of expectation unless there are organizations that are delivering on a higher level of expectation, higher level of excellence. And so I think it first starts with the donors. And then what we've been trying to do is we build a lot of software and tech products and things like that, where eventually we want other organizations to be able to use those solutions, where more organizations can be more transparent, can use more technology for scale, and that's going to allow donors to not just know where their money goes, but also give to a more efficient organization.
So what are some other organizations that you think are doing a good job at this right now?
Yeah, so there's a couple. One that's inspired us a lot, an organization called Charity Water. They build clean water wells around the world. They've really innovated in the last 10 years. Another organization is called WOTC. They crowdfund healthcare, and you get to see exactly who you're helping and where the money goes. Another organization is called Pencils of Promise. They do schools around the world. And there definitely are orgs that we believe and we see as a fresher approach and a next generation type of model. And the more organizations can do that and hopefully impact the larger organizations, right? Because disruption or new models don't happen from the top down, right? Obviously, they happen from the bottom up, and the fast eventually eat the small. It's not the big eats the small, right? And so I think the more organizations can provide those models, and then donors expect that more, then the large organizations are going to have to change the way they do things because they've been doing the same things for the last 30 years.
So, and then in terms of doing the same things, the shifting in the giving model right now, in terms of mailing in money or donating online, where do you see the future of donating now? Is it text messaging? Is it a charity app? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if there's so much an app or anything like that. I mean, texting's easy, right? But it depends on the size of the donation, right? So we have a lot of really small donations that come online or come through text, but there's obviously fees associated with those, like credit card fees, all that stuff. So a larger donation, we prefer checks and always will because there's no fee there. So I don't really know if the innovation's going to come in how people actually give. It's more of the models that people are giving to.
Are there any other changes you'd like to see among the charity field today?
Yeah, I think, so I mentioned that I didn't have a background in philanthropy. I was more of a for-profit technology startup and was just always very obsessed with startups and startup culture, right? And when I looked at a lot of charitable organizations, you just did not see that type of culture. And so I think what is really has a lot of potential is for more charities, more nonprofits to adopt the for-profit startup type of culture, mentality, who they hire, the type of talent they're going after, and align their strategy with the same type of concept that a for-profit startup would.
What about on the other side of that, the for-profit companies, how they can adapt their business model to incorporate this idea of giving back and social goodness, similar to a company like Tom's, for example?
I mean, yeah, you guys see it all over CSR and do good marketing and cause marketing is certainly a thing. We have a lot of corporate partnerships we're really excited about right now, and I think the number one reason to do it is obviously it's good for press and PR, but the number one reason is for what it does to employees at those companies, right? So you want employees to feel like there is some type of social purpose, the company is about something more than just making money, right? There needs to be some type of other social purpose. So, I mean, there's nothing more important than having your employees engaged in your culture strengthening. So I think social causes and rallying folks around really good causes that align with their brand is really smart. It's like really strategic.
So thoughts on the culture surrounding, to expand on that, are there any other core, for someone who would want to get involved and maybe start their own charity in the future, steps towards doing that and just the core beliefs that you think it should be built upon?
Okay, so I'll start with culture. I don't think there should be a difference in how a really good for-profit startup in San Francisco is created than how a nonprofit is created. There's obviously differences around compensation and the potential for future equity and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the type of culture, the people that you're hiring, really what you believe in and your business models, I think should be the same. And because you can't innovate unless you have a culture of innovation and the right people to do it, right? So the way I see it is a lot of larger charities, they basically can't do things, and the reason they can't do things is because they don't have a culture of innovation, right? Like, who are the software developers? Who are the people on their team that can actually use tech to change systems, right? Or to build things themselves. And it's just not in the culture to hire for tech or to hire the way a for-profit tech startup would. So that's the first thing. A couple core beliefs we have, there's 4. The first one is that we believe in a thing called human-centered design, which is kind of like a sexier way of saying just really having empathy. And 2 examples of that. The first is that the most important thing is to have the people that you're serving on the ground, so your beneficiaries, whoever those are, you need to work backwards to what they really want on the ground, right? You don't just build this whole thing and then expect people just to come, right? If I was going to build you, if you're going to get a new house, right? I would come talk to you and I'll ask how would you want the house designed? What would really help you and things like that. So it's starting with the end user and starting with the human experience on that side. The other part is the donor side, right? So having empathy with the donors and the end users there. What are their frustrations? What are their pain points? And then you work backwards and you design for a better experience, right? So I was really frustrated with the donor experience that I saw. Didn't know where the money was going, couldn't trust it, didn't know the end result. So what did I do? I worked backwards and said, it'd be really nice to see the family that you're helping online. It'd be really nice to know where all your money went. And it'd be great to know the end result of the donation. We do that through a move-in video. And that's just one example of putting yourself in people's shoes, right? Having empathy with how they're feeling, and then designing backwards to make your model. So that's one belief. The second belief is that technology really, really, really creates maximum scale and impact. And we've seen that just through systems that we've built, mobile op tools that we're building for partners on the ground, CRM systems that we're building, and it just allows, instead of having to hire X amount of more people and building up your overhead and kind of getting a little heavy, instead of saying lightweight, technology allows you to scale where you don't have to go hire 100 fundraisers to generate a lot of revenue, right? You can do it through product and you can do it through technology. So that's the second thing. The third thing we really believe in is an ecosystem of partners and collaboration. So News Story, what we do is when we build these communities and these villages and these homes around the world, we find the best local nonprofit partners in those areas, and we team up with them, and we come on top of them, and we actually fund them and help influence them. And so it takes an ecosystem, it takes collaboration in order to, in our opinion, scale faster and be more efficient. And then the very last thing is what we call impact data. And what that essentially means is, say that you give a family a home, right? Anecdotally, that's great, right? That's awesome. Their kids are probably going to be better in school. They're safer at night. All these things are obvious. but what happens a year after that, right? Like, can you actually measure, hey, the family was making about X dollars per month, and their kids are going to school only about 30% of the time, right? And then once they got into a new home, after a year, can you say, well, now they're making this per month, and the kids are now going to school 75% of the time, and their test scores have improved, right? And then you learn along the way, and you're able to iterate, and you're able to always test, and that's with data. So we believe data is extraordinarily important. And to kind of summarize those, it's data, ecosystem of partners, technology to scale, and then human-centered design is what we call it.
Awesome. So for those of us who want to be more involved in various charitable organizations, what are some of the sites or companies that you're following, places you're reading? Who should we be investing in and stuff like that to get more involved?
Yeah, there's actually not like a really good news outlet, or I don't know. Somebody should make one because there's a market for it. There's not a great one. You know what I would do? I would go look at like Fast Company, for example. Like they're known for they're an innovative media publication, right? They put out a list every year of the top 10 or top 20 innovators in each segment of each industry, and there's a nonprofit one as well, right? So I would go and Google the Fast Company's 2016 list, and then you get to see a bunch of up-and-coming innovative organizations that are doing things differently, and then I would look at those. And that's just one example of go to a source that you really respect and that you see as an innovative thought leader, and then reverse engineer as to who do they believe in, because there's no good nonprofit news sites or anything like that. It's kind of more driven by more of the status quo type of models.
So then we're running out of time here. So to close up, in short, if you could, can you give us some predictions of what charity might look like in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that technology is more adopted. That would probably be my number one hope. It's unfortunately has a really far way to go, but in order to do that, you first have to hire the right people, right? Nonprofits, they have to think differently about who they're hiring, the skill sets that people have, and the competency that people have. So, in summary, I hope the future of nonprofit has more technology, and that starts with hiring the type of people to do it.
Awesome. Well, Brett, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Awesome having you.
Thanks, man.